Alright, so we're going to talk about collecting performance stats because you need to know what's going on your system. So, I'm Tracy, Boggiano. Doesn't say it on this slide, it said it on the slide before. So, I've worked on SQL for over 15 years. I usually joke that I don't look old enough to have worked on SQL for that long, but thank you for the compliment. I usually get accused of being like 20-something, and doesn't go along with my years of experience. I co-lead a special user group in Raleigh for advanced DBA topics. I'm leading getting Linux sessions into the virtual past groups as well, so people can learn Linux, even though they didn't make our list of stuff we wanted to learn today. Yeah, awesome Linux. Come on. We're going to have a past marathon on it as well. I'm working on that. So I volunteer through North Carolina as a guardian ad litem for foster children. The national program's CASA, but here in Virginia it's actually, called guardian ad litem as well, from what I understand. So I'm getting used to my new job title, a database superhero at Channel Advisor. I got to pick my title, and everybody calls me a superhero, so they told me to use that one. There's all my contact information. I picked up the databasesuperhero.com one, so it's easier to spell than tracyboggiano.com. I have business cards. That's probably the easiest way to remember how to get in touch with me. So we're going to go through this real quick, as far as the first two anyways. We're going to go over why you want to collect performance stats and what you should collect, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time on how you're going to collect it, and it's going to be all demos at that point. Because there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, and I'll leave you with different ways you can go home and collect your performance stats on your own, depending on which way you find works for you and what resources you have to do it. So, one slide on why. Because you've got crazy users that come to your desk and say your stuff's running slow. And you don't know why. And you don't know if the system is really running slow. It may just be that the user's crazy and it's running normally. Your manager's at your desk wanting to know what's going on. And you need to be able to tell them, oh, my CPU's spiking right now. Oh, someone sucked out all my memory. Or my PLE just dropped to nothing. That's page life expectancy, just in case no one knows. I had someone tell me they didn't know that one time. You need to know because you rolled out a new version of the application if it's performing better or worse. You rolled out an index. Did that help or worsen things? You need to be collecting stats basically all the time. So you can tell if your system's performing better or worse at a particular time for any number of reasons, and these are the most common reasons that you need to know. So that's the whys. Now on to the whats. So what you should collect. So starting with 2005 and up, they gave us these great things called DMVs. You could actually see what was happening inside the server. In 2000, we couldn't see anything. I almost said a bad word. Edit that out, sound guy. Because that would have been bad. So, some of the things you may want to know over time is your database growth and table growth, depending on how many tables you have. At my shop, we have way too many tables to keep up with that. So we don't do it down to that level. Some of the more popular ones also, too, are your memory clerks, knowing what's taking up your memory inside of SQL. So you want to know if your buffer pool is eating up all your memory. We use Hekaton or in-memory, and that eats up a lot of memory on our system sometimes, so we need to know that. You want to know if your procedure cache is bloated because somebody's running a whole bunch of ad hoc queries, and you might need to clear those out. We had an interesting use case one time where the transaction log blocks were taking up too much memory, so now we have a special job to clear those out when it gets to 10 gigs. So we can get 10 gigs of memory back for our buffer pool. You also want to make sure you're checking out wait stats because that tells you what's running on your system and what it's waiting on. So you need to be tracking those into a table over time. That way you can do deltas on those and see, like in the last hour or 15 minutes or however often you're collecting them, in that amount of time, what your system was waiting on, so that you know when you go back and look at what queries are running, what it was waiting on, and you can figure out what resources you need or what might need to be tuned in those queries. Depending on what you use for your back-end system, you may need to know your drive latencies. Some people still are running spinning disk. I don't anymore, so I don't need to know that stuff. I know. I'm on pure spinning nothingness, solid state drives and fast stuff. But I know people still run this stuff, so that's why I always put this in here still, because I'm on the latest and greatest, and I'm lucky. And lots of other people, unfortunately, aren't as lucky.
If you're on VM and Azure, depending on the type of storage you selected,
yeah,
you see awful latency.
You may see awful latency in Azure. So this plus helps you too if you're doing it at the database level, and by the file level, you know which database is the one that sucks at performance. So sound guy might need to edit out that word. Not sure if that one qualified or not, but it's performing poorly.
Get you alone tomorrow, right?
So we've got that going for us. So some other things you want to collect is your Perfmon counters. So Windows have Perfmon counters, Linux not yet. So there's different ways to collect stuff in Linux. Microsoft has a blog about that. We won't talk about that. No one liked Linux, so. But you're going to want to know what's going on with your CPU, your memory. They've got different I/O counters that can tell you how fast things are reading and writing on your disk. Then they have all the SQL specific counters that tell you what memory is going on inside of SQL, what's happening with your AGs, what's happening with your PLE, what's happening with your buffer, how many transactions per second you're having, how many batch requests you're getting. There's a whole slew of counters you can get. So one tool I'm going to show you actually puts them in a table, and then you can edit them and put extra ones in there and take ones out, and you can determine which ones you're collecting. Another tool just collects them all for you, and you don't worry about it. So it just all depends on what you need. Another way to collect what's actually running on your system. So for the people who don't have 2016, we've got our old tried and true SP who is active. Now, we have systems at my environment that run over 30,000 transactions per second, and we dump SP who is active into a table every minute without it affecting anything. So this is a good way to know what's running on your system at the time it's running. Of course, it doesn't capture everything.
I'm sorry, I missed it. How often do you run the?
Every minute.
Every minute.
Yeah.
And you don't see a performance hit at all?
No.
Cool.
Get off 7,200.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's your takeaway.
That hurts me.
So if something's running long and somebody's having an issue, it'll normally get picked up by SP who is active.
I use who's active all the time. I was just telling them.
Does anybody not know what that is?
I won't raise my hand.
Besides Carlos's wife.
Is that Project from Carlos stuff?
No.
I can either confirm or deny.
So that's one way to just keep up with the slow running processes on your system. It'll tell you what it's waiting on depending on what parameters you pass in. You can even capture your query plans that way that it's running with. So you can use those to analyze things. My favorite thing to know what's going on is Query Store, but again, that's 2016. So a lot of people don't have 2016 yet. A new project that people have started over in Europe is Open Query Store. And they'll run 2008 to 2014. And they've got a pretty good, decent start on telling you what's busy and capturing some of the queries that are running. And they're just running some DMVs and capturing some stuff in the background. And they've wrote a couple of reports for you to display that data to you. So we'll actually look at the print screens they have on their website for that, because I don't have software that's that old. Sorry. We've deleted that. He can give us a demo tomorrow of it, because he's going to run home tonight and install it, right?
If I had admin rights on my laptop, yes.
So another thing you can do is, if you know that every day at a certain time a user's complain about something is happening, you can set up an extended event to capture everything that's running during that time period, and then you can analyze that and see if you can find what was running during that time period. That's what we're trying to replace Profiler with. Don't run Profiler on your system. If you have to, you can run a server-side trace, but don't open Profiler itself and leave it running. Like my last job, they used to leave it running on the server When I started working there, it literally ran on the server continuously, so that they had Black Tuesday, and they wanted to make sure Black Tuesday didn't happen again, and this was their answer to it. It's 20 years ago, though, on a system that only had 4 gigs of memory. Yeah, these are why bad things happen. So, any questions so far before we just jump into demo land? Jump into demo land? Yes. Demo land it is. So, we got lots of little demo lands to go into. So, the easiest way, if you don't have any resources and your company won't give you a server to do anything with, because I've been there, done that, is you can set up some SQL agent jobs and capture data yourself. And now you have Power BI. So you can actually sit there and write your own Power BI reports to look at data. So I have several little jobs that run on my server. And I'm actually going to kill this workload I got running that will show you Query Store so that my server will run a little faster. And we'll zoom in so you can actually see the names of the jobs. But I'm capturing the things we were talking about, the database file latency, the growth, our drive latency, our memory clerks. I got SP who is active, table size, wait stats, and some stuff that goes with a different demo. So we'll take a gander at what some of these queries actually look like. These queries I actually got from Glenn Allenberry's release, where he releases new queries every month for every edition of SQL Server. He edits them and puts new queries out there. I think I still have his website open to that. Or did I close it? I think all I got to is GoToMeeting. But I've got the link in my PowerPoint so that we can get to it faster. But just in case nobody's familiar with his scripts, which hopefully everybody is, he puts out new queries every month for every edition of SQL Server, and he gives you a spreadsheet where you can copy and paste the results. Spreadsheets aren't as much fun. So
I've automated that, and I'm going to be releasing it as open source. So any scripts automated.
yeah, they're actually automating and putting them in GBA tools as well.
Yeah, there's already a tool up there that
Yeah.
does that too.
So there's a few automation processes going around there.
Get done, you better hurry up.
Still going to do it.
Yeah, so
Yeah, don't like PowerShell.
So I took a few of these and I created SQL agent jobs and dumped them into tables just for demo purposes. But if you find any of these queries useful, you can do a select into and get you a table and start dumping it in there as frequently as you believe you need them in there. And you can get them specific to your version down to 2012. He's got 2008 and 2005. Those are the ones he's not updating anymore because those aren't changing, but they're all out there for you to use. Back to demo machine. We don't want query stores. So just a basic query from him for database file latency. He queries it out of the virtual file stats. And we get it by database name. And we get each file and it tells us our reads and our writes and how long it's taking and whether it's stalling or not, what's queued up, what's not queued up, and it spits out data and puts it into that table for us. So everything, of course, on my VM's all on the C drive and does us of no good analytically, but it's there for us. So this particular demo, as you go through, if you're setting up SQL agent jobs and you dump it in Power BI again, it's for if you got an environment where nobody's going to give you a server to have reporting services or run any other servers to do things with. And it's a quick, easy way to you create a baseline database on each server, start putting data in there, and then you can open up Power BI and create your own reports. So we've got this basic report going in there, and then we've got a few others as well. The drive latency is the same thing. It's just grouped by the drive. I've got a database growth one that's based off of your backup size, because depending on how often you take your backups, you run this. It puts the backup size into a table, and it tells you your file growth on your backups. Then I've got one for table growths. Memory clerks I've customized a little bit because some of the names are really long so that they show up smaller. So I shortened down buffer pool to buffer pool, and some of the other ones I like the hekaton name rather than the XPT name. And we run that, and we actually run and keep that every 5 minutes into ours because our memory fluctuates so much, especially because we use hekaton and things come in and out. So we've got all these different DMVs that we can put into queries, but most of these have been pulled from Glenn's queries. So Glenn has a couple hundred queries, it seems like. I went through and pulled out some for the note card that we'll look at if we get to those tomorrow. And you can take any of Glenn's queries and basically turn them into a select into and start dumping them in tables using a SQL agent job at any frequency, and then just set up something to clean them up. And add a date time field so you know when you captured them. Then you can use PowerBI to make a simple report. And it'll ask you to update it every month. Y'all get a little exposure to Power BI. People were asking about that. Not going to teach you much about it, but it is on here. So I'm going to tell it to refresh our data.
So if I understand the hierarchy or the data, I guess lineage or whatever you want to call it correctly, you're using the DMVs, the scripts, to capture data, which you're storing into a table.
Yep.
A DBA table.
Yeah, I think I did.
Or a database, rather.
Yep.
And then the reports then
Pull
peek at
from
that.
there.
And then,
Yep.
So do you keep the data local to each instance?
Yep. In this particular demo, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess
And
for
then you would
larger
set up a
shops,
job to clean it out.
Okay. Would it make sense to have that centralized at some point in a single database to make reporting easier?
It would, and I use a completely different product and demo for that at the end. So that has nothing to do with Windows. But that takes a lot more work to get it all centralized. So, but this is what my computer's been doing. You see, it's been off a little bit. It slept last night. But we do have some stuff going on, and you can't really see much of it because it's really small. But it doesn't do much in the way of buffer pool. That would be my gray. It seems to be my statement plans that take up most of my space over here. And it just graphs it out. But if you wanted to create a new report, we could just create a tab. We could pick one of our tables, and we can you just simply drag it over, and that's not the value we want, so we drag it to a different place because that's a field we want, depending on which graph we want. We pick a graph. There we go. Drag for me. Yeah. Filter type. We'll do that. Equal access methods. And then we want the value here. And we want a legend to be that. And our access to be that. And that to be gone. So I drew over our access at the bottom via our time. And I filtered out our access methods, like our forwarded records being an example of a counter. And I just built a report just by dragging 3 fields over into Power BI over in these columns. You tell it what you want on the bottom axis. You tell it what counter you want, what legend you want it to be, which is what counter I wanted on my graph. You could put multiple counters on here if you select what you're filtering by down here. And I told it I want the value to be graphed. Unfortunately, I didn't insert any records, so I didn't have any forwarded, so it's not showing me any data. I'd have to do some scrolling down on some of these filtered values to find something to actually graph. There we go. There's goes something to graph. So that's database transactions per second graphing there. So I did a few transactions on my server. But that's how easy it is to use Power BI. If, like I said, this is a solution for if you're in a shop that won't give you a server to store some data on or a server to actually write reports on. I've had a job like that. Again, Tracy should do a talk on Tracy's terrible jobs, I've been told. So this is why I do this part of my presentation, because there are people out there that will have jobs that will tell you not to even create a database where you can store your data like this, and you'll just do it anyways because you're a good DBA and want to do it. So any questions on how this method of collecting data works? Yes.
What kind of, do you need any special permissions to run those queries from Glenn Berry's site? I just have like read, write access. Is that enough? Or?
You're going to need view server state.
Or view system state.
Yeah, because most of those are going to be, some of them are going to be at the server level and some of them are going to be at the database level. So for the DMVs, it's usually view server state. But if you're going to be setting up jobs, you're going to need access to be able to set up jobs. So somebody will set up the jobs, and then you're going to need the ability to read whatever tables you're storing that data into. Hopefully they'll let you have a database to store some data. But that's the basics of, like I said, if somebody won't give you a server where you can run some stuff, here's a quick, dirty way to get you some data and be able to graph it and say, look, I do need a place to do this, but can I get something a little bit more complex? So we'll cover SP who is active in query store in that amount of time. For those of you who, most of you already know who is active. It's got its own domain now. So it got off of blogs because he's shutting that down. So its own domain for documentation. So you can download it and find all the documentation. And day 24 is how he tells you to put it into a table and get the data that you want. Actually, it's the next day. Why was that one at? Capturing data is the one you want, so it can tell you how to put it into a table and capture it every minute or every 5 minutes, however long you think you're going to need it. Kendra Little did a podcast where she set up a SQL agent job based off counters on her system, and when she hit a certain threshold, she let this run and capture whatever was running at that particular time. So if you can't store the data every minute, that's another way you can do it. If you're noticing a particular spike in a certain time of day, you can just run it during that time period, or you can run it based off a counter on your system. You can start up the job and let it run for an hour and then stop it. You don't have to run it all the time. We find it useful to run all the time. I used it to get myself back to my nap the other week. Yes?
How much or how long do you keep your who is active for? Do you keep it for a day, 2 days?
We keep it for a week.
Just a week?
Yeah.
Is that a rolling week?
Yeah. Just we have a job that cleans up anything older than 7 days.
Gotcha.
So.
Basically, it's a set job, the collection job.
Right.
Clean up anything that's in there in that file location.
Yeah, we have a specific job that goes through anything we've got collecting into a database. So anything that you would set up to collect, you need something to clean it up, because otherwise you're going to be causing other performance problems querying it.
Right.
So, now, like I said, I don't have any older versions of SQL, so I haven't set up Open Query Store, but I do have Query Store, and I do have a whole presentation I could give on Query Store, but no one asked for that, so you're not getting that.
No one asked for that.
No one asked for that. But Query Store does give you some cool reports of stuff that's happening on your server. So as you can tell, I ran some stuff today, just in case it came up. But you can see how long stuff's been running on your server. Normally this graph would be completely full, hopefully on your servers, and it tells you how, the execution count on stuff, how many reads are happening on your server.
And I
And
think
the
I asked
CPU time.
I watched your presentation on this, and I think I asked the question about, is there any performance hit on enabling query store at the database level? And you mentioned you had,
2016 became so much faster that we didn't notice a performance hit. So
I was going to ask, did you notice because you did the upgrade to the backend?
yeah, we didn't. We turned it on everywhere. The only thing we noticed is it with the default size of being 100 megs, we filled it up too fast. So we recommend setting it up to take 2 gigs. And Erin Stellato presented to our advanced DBA group, and she recommends the same size by coincidence. So.
and also it's the primary file group, right?
Yes, it's in the primary file group. We filed a Connect item about it. Please upvote it. If you go to my website, you can download my presentation, and there's a link to the Connect item in it. And I'm actually doing that presentation for a virtual group on November 7th if anybody actually wants to learn about Query Store.
There you go.
But you can actually drill down in and see what the top consumers are and get to your query plans. And if you had multiple query plans, and like in this example, if these were different colors and you wanted to force a good plan, this takes care of your parameter sniffing problems that one person was worried about. Well, when you get to Query Store, at the click of a button, you can make it use a good plan, and you get rid of your parameter sniffing problems. So that's all I'm going to talk about Query Store. But this is a good way to capture data. I'd take a look at Open Query Store if you can't get to 2016, but I would try to convince my boss to just upgrade, personally, because this is the best feature they've put into SQL in a while, in my opinion. And it's available in all editions, even Express. So it takes care of Query Store. Okay. The MS Tiger team has a PowerShell way of collecting Perfmon counters that comes with reporting services reports. So they've got everything out here documented on how to set it up. You basically got to run a few scripts to create a database locally on your machine, on each machine that you want to collect stats on. And you've got to put some PowerShell scripts on the server into C scripts and create a job for it to run. And then you create a reporting server and you dump the reports into it. And the job just runs and collects all the Perfmon counters for you. And then you can, when you bring up reporting services, you just got to put in the name of your server, and it'll connect to that server and run reports for you. And that gives you a centralized way of getting to the reports. The data is still spread out everywhere, but you have built-in reports already, and you don't have to build them yourself. It's not as customized as building Power BI for you, but at least the reports are already built for you. And the data is not centralized anywhere, and there's no cleanup of it, so you still have to somehow go in there and look at their stuff and don't let it grow to be a terabyte worth of data. So I have set this up on our nice virtual machine here. So it's created our DBA local here for us. And then I've been using this for all my baselining data. So all these TBLEs are stuff that they're collecting data in, including the Perfmon counter and the Perfmon counter list. Now you can actually customize the counter list and add counters in that you want to collect because they don't have availability groups in there. So I've added some in there for availability groups. And you can take stuff out that you don't care about because they do have a lot of things listed. So as you've seen by me having to scroll through that list in Power BI, that was the table that I was querying from is the one that they use. So you can actually use your custom stuff and theirs and still use Power BI and get a lot of data. So, and it's really weird how it works. Kind of interesting. I think it's interesting anyways. The Perfmon Collection sets up a job, and they run it every 5 minutes. Now, it runs PowerShell, but it actually runs a stored procedure. Don't ask me why they did it that way, but that's how they do it. They run a PowerShell script from within a stored procedure to collect your Perfmon data for you. A little weird, but it works.
So I guess why? Because the Perfmon data is ultimately at the OS level. They have to get outside of the database, right?
Yeah, I just figured they would use, CMD exec instead. to do PowerShell, but I guess they use that inside the store procedure instead. So it's just, you would think with a PowerShell entrance. Explorer. Like I said, what's nice about this is you actually get some reports already built for you. So you start off with the SQL dashboard. I promise you it did not do that last night. It's not doing anything. It's got 8 gigs of memory.
It did in 2016. I mean, that was
Anything else open on here? Ah, I defeated it. I closed Studio Manager.
Of course, open transaction.
No, all I had was Glenn Allenberry's queries open so that I could show those for the last part. So we'll just have to fetch them again. So, like I said, this one's kind of nice because it gives you a little dashboard view of how your processor utilization goes, your workflow, and your memory and your disk latency. My disk latency is in the red.
So we're still looking at the SQL Cat team download.
Yeah, the Tiger team put this on GitHub. So there's a link on my resource slide for it. And in my notes so I could copy and paste it and not skip to my resource slide to get it.
Gotcha.
So with all the directions you need to install it.
You're still using RC2. Do you know the 2017 was released 2 days ago?
No, you could not download it until yesterday, though. We tried to download it on Monday and it was not there. I was not going to break all my demos for 2017. I will install it tomorrow while you guys are talking. But to make Carlos's conference good and make sure that things were working, I didn't install it. I mean, what was I going to do with a broken VM, Carlos? See what he tried to make me do? I mean, come on.
It's outrageous.
FYI, my build is RTM. I'm just saying.
But you break things.
Oh, yikes.
You break things, I fix things. There's a difference. So I didn't.
Yikes.
So, and like I said, over the history, it's showing me my processor utilization and my workload, batches per second, user connections, how many times it's recompiled, my disk latency. Yeah, my disk is slow. Available memory. And you can actually drill down on some of these and see it for a particular time span. And you can also tell when my computer hasn't been on, doing anything. So they've got some nice reports already built for you if you don't want to have to build any reports. I find building reports in their way of building reports is not as much fun as PowerBI. PowerBI is a lot easier. But again, these are published where everybody can get to them, as where PowerBI is not. So it depends on which route you want to take and whether you can get a reporting server available to you or not, on whether you want to take this method or not. But this gives you a nice, quick, easy way. You just put in the server name, and if you have that database there and it's collecting data, you can connect to it and bring up these reports. They have one specifically built for the memory utilization. We'll pick today, and we'll see what it's been doing while it's been running its little workload. My page like expectancy was doing good until I came to Carlos's class and started up my VM. Then it went, shoo. Then I started making it do some work.
And it also doesn't have Carlos's name.
It even has an index fragmentation report for you if you wanted to know how fragmented your indexes were for a particular database.
Is that just logical Or is it physical as well?
I don't know. Let's see if it tells us. Just does average fragmentation.
Oh, then it's logical.
Yeah, so. And VentureWorks is just like all kinds of fragmented on my machine because I run that Jonathan Kahai script to blow it up all the time. So I don't have anything to re-index it. So.
Have you used the wide row deporters yet?
It's on my machine. Does that count as using it?
It is horrible.
Why did they call it wide? Because everyone's worldwide. I know. That's the whole point. Why did?
And then you do have a report that can tell you how much storage you're using on your C drive. So I'm using 2 gigs on my or any drive that you have. So this gives you a quick way to see which databases are taking up the most space on your hard drives. So that can help you with meeting your storage requirements.
Wait, which one was that?
Oh, that was storage on your hard drive.
Okay.
And then they just have a daily trend performance report that you can look at for the day. See, we came to Carlos's class and my computer just
Fire.
just caught on fire. See all that red?
It's a dumpster fire.
No, we have those at work. We literally have a Slack thing where we put DP and boom, a dumpster appears because we have things that happen at work. So those are 2 ways of collecting data, and they collect local to your system. And using this method gives you an easy way where you just put in the computer name and you've got reports. And of course, you can build off those reports if you're good at building reports in the Visual Studio and deploying those to your reporting server. But you got to have a reporting server for it. So otherwise, you can customize whatever you want to collect and build Power BI reports off of it. Yes.
Would you manually check this every so often? Would you have this if something was getting pegged, it sent some sort of alert to go check these tables, or check these reports, or what's the practical use on a daily basis, or how often would you use this?
Well, what we do pretty much
or wait for
is
somebody to complain, or
we have a different system that actually checks for performance-related stuff that just kind of as a warning that whoever's on call looks at just periodically through the day and sees if anything's in yellow. And we have a few checks in there for like if the CPU's high, if Hekaton's taking up too much memory, if our drives are running low on space. We don't have anything that pages us or emails us if we got anything out of whack with performance. We mainly wait for a user to say something's out of whack, and we go in there and we see spikes in charts and stuff. And we use a completely different system for that, and that was going to be the last part of my presentation. But in that system, you can actually set up alerts as well. So in reporting services, there's really no way to set up an alert. You can query the data and get an alert, though. If you know how often it's going in there, you can query it and send yourself an email.
Is the database well built, fairly intuitive to build queries like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's just one table for all your Perfmon counters, and that's pretty much what you would want to alert off of is your Perfmon counters. So.
I think we should say, right, so that idea of baselining or monitoring, well, I don't want to use the word monitoring, but so baselining or information collecting is not the same as firefighting, right? So we don't necessarily, for example, it's like turning on your monitoring, right? And then all of a sudden it just starts sending you random alerts. You're like, well, is it important, right? Does it matter? And so I think the idea here is that now I have a baseline so that at least I can see, okay, well, last week, yeah, we had a couple CPU spikes. Now when the user says, hey, we're having a problem, I can say, okay, well, this seems to be normal, so that's not the problem, right? Let me go try something else.
90% utilization at a certain time might be understandable, but even 30%, another time might be like, hey, wait, that's way too high. What's going on?
Yeah,
once we get to high usage times, that's going to compound.
Right. Then at least you have a history to go back and see.
You go back and say,
this is from a different presentation I've done. I got a page that said a server was down. It really wasn't down. It couldn't be connected to for 10 seconds by my monitoring system. And I went and checked, and the server was up. So I went back to taking my nap on Saturday and took an on-call selfie. So
yeah, it seems to be a thing over with you guys.
So about 2 hours later, I woke up and I went and I checked our charts to see what was going on. And this is our memory utilization from our memory clerks. And our buffer pool had dropped by 30 gigs. And my PLE went to 0 at that time.
And that happens every night if you're doing index reboots, for example.
No,
You
well,
shouldn't be doing that.
it happens when you do that, or it happens when you run check DB, which I pulled out on my SP who is active that I collect every minute. So I give this as an example in my baselining talk that I do at SQL Saturdays as why you want baselines, because if you don't know where you're supposed to be or what your PLE is supposed to be, you don't know that something happened and you don't know to go check. And if you're not collecting data here, you don't know why that happened.
You don't want to alert every day with PLE drop to 0.
And I've told them our socket timeout of 10 seconds is too little, that they need to change that to 30 seconds because I don't want to be woke up over a 10-second blip. I didn't write the alert, so. But that alert woke me up. But 2 hours later, I got up to figure out, why it woke me up, because the server was up. I checked, it was up, so I went back to my nap. See, my on-call selfie.
The last part of my presentation was going to be on this plugin called Telegraph. The reason I like this plugin is because it can monitor more than just SQL. It's very easy to install. You just download the newest update, you unzip it wherever you want it on your system, and you run Telegraph -- service install, and it installs as a service. Then you have a config file, and you configure where you want your data to go. I configure it to go to Flux DB, which is a time series database, because we're capturing time data for performance counters and DMVs and the like. And then your front end is a Grafana system, which is just basically a system for graphing the data. So I want to show you what Grafana looks like. And I've got a few links in the slide deck that shows you how to go through installing Influx and Grafana. So, because that takes time, so I don't.
But could you use SQL and reporting services, or the raw data grabber is Telegraph?
The raw data grabber is Telegraph, and there's a bunch of different ways you can output the data.
Okay.
That's all right. It's got a bunch of different plugins. And I believe there was an output directory. I thought there was. Did I go far enough back? No, I'm still in Flux DB. But there's a spot that tells you the different ways you can
take us back through, right? I guess so ultimately we're talking about monitoring, right? With this guy, you're talking about grabbing
there's
metrics
your different ways you can output the data. These are the different output things, and because it's grabbing it by time, it doesn't actually have SQL as an option. So you have to put it into a system that's built for time series data. So this is like completely different than putting in SQL and using reporting services.
Okay.
So, this is what we're actually using where I'm at. So. So basically what I did is I have a VM that has Influx DB, and I configured it to go to that VM to put the data in, and then I have another VM that has Grafana, and I got the dashboard from somebody that already had a dashboard built, and I imported that JSON into it. And then from there you can actually create graphs right in Grafana, and you don't have to go to reporting services to create it and then import it into reporting services and do all that publishing stuff. I find this much easier to use than reporting services.
So it's an interesting, so I think one of the,
And this gives you that central repository for all your data is another reason I like it.
You're also introducing new technology, right? So I guess how did you make that decision, or I guess there's always the rabbit hole of some other tool, right? Something else we got to learn, keep up with, maintain, right?
Well, one of the reasons we went with it too is because we didn't want to have to keep loading the data local to the SQL server, because then you're adding resources to that SQL server, and then you're querying the data off the SQL server with all the other metrics that you're using. So you're putting another additional load on that SQL server. If you're using a Tiger Team solution, you're putting the data onto that system, and then every time you read that data, you're reading that data from that local system.
So the Tiger Team doesn't have the ability to take the data and put it, export it to a second system. It has to be local.
It's local. So this way you have everything in one system. You can also build graphs where you have multiple systems on the same dashboard. So like in my environment, we have systems, we're a sharded environment, so we have systems that have similar data on them. So we can build a dashboard that shows us like 8 servers on one dashboard because they all do the same thing. And we can go, over here something's going awry because a particular customer is doing something. So if you have that type of situation, you can do that, or you just have certain servers that are critical that you need to monitor. You can put your critical servers on one dashboard and watch those. And then, the other ones, you can go off and watch them separately. So.
Well, this is embarrassing.
No, it's just because I never shut down my VM right. So it's really not embarrassing at all.
We're embarrassed for you.
No, but
Not the least bit embarrassing. So.
Jonathan, tell us about this black background.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you can tell me if my visualization is good or not, It's not loading any data right now. That's a little embarrassing, so we got to switch servers, that's why. So I do have 3 different servers that are putting data over here. Only one of them is actually turned on right now, so we'll switch to that one. We can actually see if anything's running over there. So we gotta wait for it to load the data again because it loaded data for one that wasn't doing anything.
It's not a good visualization. So how do you have for your data collection? How is that scheduled? Is that like an agent job or?
It's a service on your machine. Like I said, you download the Telegraph and you install it, and it installs it as a service on your machine, and it just automatically collects the data for you.
So what is that, like every minute, every?
I think it's every minute. So, but basically it gives you a nice dashboard that shows you your CPU, which right now my machine's not doing anything, and your signal weights. And it'll show you your target memory and your page file and your buffer pool. And you basically from within here you can double click and get a bigger graph of each thing, and you can drill down on anything and make more graphs that you want to see within in the interface.
So you mentioned you pulled this from a site. So it's the community.
It's a community GitHub repository. So there's nothing running on my server. Did I not spin up the workload on there?
So one of the things I find frustrating, right? Even this with monitoring tools, right? Even dashboards, things like this. You get the tool, and I guess they want you to feel like they're showing you lots of information, so you'll feel like it's valuable. But sometimes you look at it and you're like, I don't care. Like,
well, that's the thing about this is you can customize it. You can literally remove anything you don't want on this dashboard out. If you don't want to see it, just take it out.
So I'm curious, right? So I guess thoughts on that idea. That sounds like an interesting discussion, right? So thoughts on how you would customize your dashboard, right? What do you want to see first?
This is the
what do you want to drill down
dashboard
into? Almost like that storyboarding of, right?
This is where you want to have multiple tabs.
Because
like
this
that.
is not the dashboard we use at work.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff we use at work's not built into Telegraph yet. Because we're working on building in some of the stuff that we use at work into Telegraph.
Okay.
With the person that built Telegraph. So I can't demo that particular type of stuff yet.
Sure.
So.
I think with any dashboard, though, like if you're doing monitoring, you kind of know what you want. Like everything has to be customized.
Yeah.
So if you just download a monitoring tool, run it, and then say, I'm monitoring, right? It's not
yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a proof of concept with the Century One monitoring tool right now. We did an earlier evaluation of them and 3 other tools. And we narrowed it down to that one. But even with that one, great tool, but it's information overload. We talked, that.
Well, this
Jonathan talked about that. We just
Yeah.
got so much stuff coming in. And it's a process where you have to go through and decide, is this important to me?
Right.
Like I said, this one allows you can create your own dashboard. Like you can start with this one and delete out stuff that doesn't matter to you. This one actually allows you to set up alerts as well if you want to start getting emails when your CPU gets high or something like that, so you can act on things. So you can really build this to be a monitoring and alerting system if you want it to be. We've chosen not to get alerts out of it because we have an alerting system for other things because we get alerted on things just besides performance stuff. So we don't want alerts coming from too many different places. And like I said, from within here, you can, once you click on one of the headers, it'll bring up an edit screen, and I can literally go in and edit the graph from within here, and it has where you can pick your CPU and what server you want, and it just fills in a generic instance name based on what server we had picked, and I'm picking CPU usage as my metric, and I'm telling it just by that time interval, fill it out, and I can change what type of graph it is. If I don't like having a little radar thing, I could change it to a bar graph or a pie chart.
A pie chart.
As long as it's 3D.
I can make it 3D. I can put multiple charts on the same thing.
It's all about obfuscation of data.
I can literally make it anything I want in here. I can add multiple queries, so I can have multiple things hitting the same spot. One of the dashboards actually, if it'll actually get some data from my system. Come on, I sent some stuff to you. Down in the buffer cache, it usually loads up like 3 different things of the memory manager. It'll show you your buffer pools and your hackathon and things that are going on inside of it. It was showing data yesterday.
I was going to say that it was showing the 3 different things.
Yeah.
In the PowerBI a moment ago.
So today it doesn't seem to have any data loaded. So I don't know why it's not refreshing. Refresh every 5 seconds. Apply. Get some data. I know my VM's up and running some stuff. I picked the right server name, yeah.
So with this, do you have to set up like how long the data is stored for, and you have to image all that?
Yeah, when you set up your Flux DB, you would tell it how long you want to keep the data, and it would automatically purge the data for you. That's one thing that's nice about the time series database is when you go through the setup process of it, you can tell it just to keep your data for like 30 days, and it'll automatically purge it for you. You don't have to worry about cleaning out tables and things like that. It can automatically keep up with that for you, and you don't have to worry about the individual tables and stuff. So it's not showing data. Let's change our last hour to this year so far. So I know I've done stuff this year.
Data.
That looks better. Now let's tell it not to refresh every 5 seconds, because that's going to get on my nerves. Because it won't let me scroll if it's refreshing every 5 seconds. See? Continue. All right, come on. See, we got data, but...
So I felt like we had a couple of other questions yesterday from this session.
Well, I do have that covered as well. We will skip over that. We've seen some data pop up, but me and my coworker are working on customizing this more towards 2016 and 2017 and trying to make some of the metrics better, and we'll be publishing some better dashboards that are smaller than this big long one. That way you don't have to have a big gigantic dashboard to look at.
Are you going to contribute back to the GitHub project?
Yes. We're actually going to put it into the GitHub project. So, and then I'll actually be writing up actually how to install everything step by step so that it's easier. Because I had to go to multiple websites to figure out how to install everything.
Then I'm a fork.
Yeah.
So
So you can't have a black bag.
So we had some questions around, I think, parameter sniffing and how to find out what bad things are running on our servers. So when I first started my job at Channel Advisor, that was a big problem. So we actually wrote a procedure that automatically recompiled things based on high CPU, or whether blocking was going on, or whether we were seeing high translocks, which was for some reason a big problem where we were at. So we used Glenn Allen Berry's queries to actually find those in the cache. If you're not familiar with Glenn Allen Berry's queries, there are certain ones on there that will tell you which ones are your high-performing queries in your cache at that moment. Of course, if you're not running 2016, if you have Query Store in 2016, you can just use that to find it. But if you're not, you can use his queries to diagnose your systems, and from there, you pretty much just have to do a recompile if you're having parameter sniffing to find out. But I do have a procedure. If you know it's causing high CPU or high reads, you can set up a SQL agent job to detect it and just tell it to recompile it using some code I have. So, let's see, I put in the slide deck some which query numbers to look at. Not that slide deck. That slide deck was just to illustrate I take naps. So he has a number of queries that go into things on the server side. So we'll start with query 32 and basically on down through 50 and look at some of the different ones that were running on my machine at the time that I ran an AdventureWorks workload against my machine to produce some data. Query 32. So one of the things he has is he can tell you your missing indexes across all your databases and which ones might help you. As everybody knows, I'm sure, don't just create any missing index that this DMV pops up. Investigate it, find out what it does. It may be better to add columns to an existing index. It may be better to consolidate down some indexes you already have. If you just go with whatever's there, you may end up with a mess. But as you can tell, it thinks AdventureWorks needs some indexing help. So that's one way to help out your system when you see slow performance, is just to see what indexes are missing on your system and evaluate them.
So that's an interesting question, right? So his index advantage, what's the metric there?
I'm not sure how they come up with that metric.
Okay. So what's your number, right? So using his scripts, what's your number?
Kimberly Tritt calls those frackles.
Particles.
Frackles.
Particles.
Particles.
Query bucks. They don't actually have a unit.
Yeah, it's just...
No, okay, no.
It's a made-up number.
Yeah, okay, well, that's right. Okay, but I am now trying to make a decision based off of that number, right, which is kind of made up. So there's some kind of threshold, right? So, for example, my query, we have 1 million, right? So 1 million, once I get 1 million of that, which I think is pretty much the same user seeks times the cost. We're doing something else, like so reads or lookups or something as well. So we're making a calculation, and then we're saying, okay, once I hit that 1 million threshold, okay, that to me means like, okay, you just gotten on my important list, right? Because like that's a candidate, not all the time. I want to investigate a little more, but you are now a candidate for implementation.
So it depends on your server.
Right.
It depends.
Well, no, so that's why I'm asking. So on Glenn Berry's scripts, what's the number?
There isn't a number.
There's not a number.
There isn't a number because it depends on your server and if it's actually impacting your workload. Because that index advantage could be 10 million, but it's only being run once a year, so it doesn't matter. So you're not.
If it is 10 million and it's being run once a year, I'm going to put it in.
But the maintenance on that index might impact other workloads.
Yeah.
So
I mean, if you know you need it once a year, stick it on there for that report and then drop it after the report's ran.
It's a very good question, Carlos, because this is what people do, is they go and create these indexes that never get used, but they're impacting because of the performance, because they need to be maintained. It's an excellent question, but there is no answer.
There is no answer. So
is that number basically just a relative measure?
It's a relative measure, and the problem is every single piece of hardware now is much, much faster than when that number was first created.
a number was created like on SQL 7, was it? They said, or 2000 or something, on some PC that they had running in the lab.
Building 21 on the Redmond.
Yeah, I mean, they told us that.
That's the cost. Like that's the CPU cost or whatever.
Query cost.
So
Yeah,
the point is that it depends on your workload and the impact that index might have on other.
Sure. Yeah, so fair enough, right?
Say like what what would be a good candidate to like ignore versus pay attention to?
Yeah, and I think I got to, I do want to say, I guess I'll say that, so you become a candidate on my important list. That probably means that I'm going to implement you, but it also, I guess I'm implying that I'm now monitoring the index. What's the usage and the effect of adding the index? If it starts getting used, then I'm like, done.
So
right?
I look at those numbers and I see they're in the thousands. I don't care about thousands. When I see something that's a factor of, then I start thinking about it. But those numbers, I mean, this is obviously a demo, but
yeah,
there's number 5 I don't care about. And in fact, I don't care about number 1 either.
Right. No, that's why I'm asking. What's the number? So using this script, what number do I start caring about?
But then
I got
can't you follow
and you
this
also
up
got to
with-
base it off of what you might be pulling out of your cache that's running and it's doing a lot of reads, and then you compare it to this and go, oh, I might be able to reduce that query by using a missing index that's in here. So there's other queries that you can pull together to say, okay, maybe I need to go look at my missing indexes because I'm doing a lot of reads with a particular query. Let me see what's in that query and compare it to what's in missing indexes.
Doesn't Glenn have a script that tells you if the index has been used?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you get count.
But that gets reset.
Server's been restarted. Exactly, Tracy.
It gets reset on that. It gets reset on rebuilds depending on what service pack and CU you're on based on what version you're on when you do rebuilds and reorgs. So you've got to pay attention to that. I can't remember exactly which ones they are. I can look that up though.
But what's the nice thing is, which Tracy has also demonstrated, is if you are capturing these statistics regularly, then if
You can
something
look.
does get rebuilt or re-indexed when the server restarts, you've still got that history. And you go back, say, I don't know, I have a report that runs once a year or twice a year. You can go back and see if that has been affected in the last 6 months.
Are you in the top 10 over a period of,
Yeah, it might be more useful to actually track this in terms of delta in the index advantage. If something went from 10 to 10,000, you're like, okay, this is obviously getting used in a different way now. What happened? Or if they added new tables and never happened to mention that to you, and you see like, okay, this is terribly done. Where did this come from?
Right.
So,
and they're only if it's impacting your workload. If it's running in 100 milliseconds, you don't care. If it's been run a million times and it's taking 100 milliseconds, then I care.
Right. Yeah. I guess my only caveat is I don't always want the users to complain to me they're having a problem. Right. I feel like this is kind of one of those proactive.
But
right. Like
tuning is also not necessarily a good thing if it's not necessary.
So again, my spidey senses. Right. There's that threshold. Okay, my spidey senses are on. You know what? I'm going to preemptively try this, test it out, and then if it's no good, then we'll take it off.
Yeah, but if you've got the performance monitoring set up and you notice that your CPU's high and you're tracking your reads and your writes and you suddenly notice that you go high, that's when you go into here and try to figure out what's consuming the most and decide if you need to tweak
I'm
it.
going to update my statistics first.
True.
Yeah.
Because that's less load, less time.
Actually, that's part of my auto recompile procedure is it'll update stats first. And then if it goes in a second time within a certain amount of time, it'll recompile the procedure.
If they have spinning disks, I might rebuild an index. But if it's SSDs, I'll only go to statistics unless it's like a
Yeah.
Oh, even I don't rebuild my indexes.
But 7,200, maybe. 10,000 RPM. Okay.
Yeah, we have a special job for rebuilding indexes based on how often what's been updated.
Because I use Ola's scripts anyway.
Well, I don't rebuild my indexes because I'm stuck on standard, so I have you take that database offline in order to do it. And so I only do that in dire needs.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just.
And we only do it based off of if anything's changed on our statistics. So we have a special job just for statistics, and we base it on how many rows have been modified, because it won't auto update unless a certain number of rows have been changed, and we have large tables, so it doesn't auto update for us. And we don't, and our indexes don't get that defragged because of my auto. I have a process that runs and tracks page splits, bad page splits, and automatically sets our lowers our fill factor to account for that. So we set everything at 100 to start out with. And then if we get bad page splits, we lower it by 2% until we get to a good number, but we never go less than 70%. And then we don't get bad page splits, and we do less rebuilding of our indexes. So then we have a special job just for stats. So.
Good question, Carlos.
It'll lead you down a rabbit hole, Carlos.
Well, it's just one of those things. It's one of the things. We start collecting all these numbers, right? It's kind of like, okay, when do we start doing something? Yeah, exactly.
What does this measure?
Yeah.
What does it tell you? Because it depends on your workload.
It depends on your workload, yeah.
You don't want to do preemptive tuning unnecessarily, so you have to relate.
I don't like that sentence. Don't want to do.
You don't have to.
You don't have to. Yeah, well, there you go. All right, fair enough.
I'm hedging. And I believe in indexes. I do.
Sure.
But I don't believe in creating unnecessary indexes because.
Well, that's right. Nobody wants to do that.
Especially if you've got transactions.
They have to be used, right? They have to be.
Yeah.
You have to carry your weight.
Yeah, I wouldn't start there, but this might be a query to start with if you all of a sudden start noticing your CPU's high. It can tell you which database is running high on CPU.
So you can use this in conjunction with some of the stuff we might have looked at yesterday.
Yeah. So you can track, like, I run workloads only on this database. So you can see the database that I'm collecting stats in is only taking 2% of my CPU, whereas when I run workloads, my workload's taking 97% of my CPU. So that's the database that's eating up my system. Now, when I have a server that has 100 databases, it gets spread out a little bit more.
And is this number, that 97% is now, this point in time, or since a certain value?
Since it's been booted up.
Okay.
So since yesterday.
And that's not total percentage. That's a percentage that SQL Server has used.
Yes.
So if your CPUs are running at 20% average, that's 97 point whatever percent of that 20%.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's just telling you, which one of your databases is eating up the CPU that SQL's using. So if you running high on CPU and you need to figure out which database it is, you can start there to figure out, hey, this is a database I need to take a look at.
Could you add this to add an insert into statement in here over time to get a better idea
of which one it is? Yeah. That's why I recommend Glenn Allen's Barry's queries yesterday, is because you can take any of these queries, and if you want to start baselining some stuff, just ad hoc into your own database to start with. You can start with his queries because they're all diagnostic queries. So.
Glenn's also got one in here that shows you the last 4 hours, 256 minutes.
That's 256 minutes.
Yeah.
SQL versus other.
Okay.
Whatever the other is, because it can't know. But then you can have a look at that compared to the runtimes of the queries, this kind of stuff.
And the one right below this one tells you by I/O what's happening on your server. So, of course, now on mine it's going to be temp DB.
It should be temp DB.
So, poor temp DB. It's a bad rap. Yeah, it's basically what it is. One day maybe we'll get a temp DB per database, but I'm afraid of that on my servers that I have 100 databases.
Well,
but my coworkers want that, and I'm just like, that means I'd have like 6,000 databases.
But the thing there is, I think it should be a configurable option that you can have.
Yep.
And you could turn it on, yeah. So.
But at the same time, why don't you just create extra files and all that stuff? It's huge stuff.
Yeah. Now, if you're keeping up with your memory clerks from before, and you see your buffer pool, and you want to know which database is consuming your buffer pool, Glenn Allenberry has a query that tells you what's taking up your buffer pool. So even though I'm not really using the DBA local database, but to collect stats, it's still taking up 30% of my buffer pool. So that's what happens when you're collecting your data local for performance stats and querying it. So it's one reason I like off-shifting it to the Flux DB solution, because then I'm not taking any performance hits inside of SQL for that. So I don't we weren't going to demo that query. We've already looked at weight stats from yesterday.
So speaking of weight stats, so I was trying to figure out the pros and cons of running. If I use Glenn's script, and instead of having to do complicated queries, if I just run Glenn's script and then run the DBCC SQL Perf clear weight stats, each time I run his clear the stats or run his script, before I run it the next time, run it again, clear it, run it again, and every say hour I would do that, so the numbers are easier to look at. Is there a pros and cons of clearing the weight stats as long as you're tracking the numbers?
If you look at Glenn's script, he's got the here first stats commented out.
Oh, so you could. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
if you're going to capture it, I don't see a problem with doing that. If you're
Clear it.
capturing
Okay.
Well, I guess the tricky part would be how do you then match, right, what your workload is to the stats? Because you're collecting this, I mean, you're kind of looking at cumulative. I feel like, well,
he's capturing it every
there's
hour.
two components, right? So here, I want to be able to tie. I guess I'm looking cumulative weight stats. That just helps me know overall system. If I'm going to then drill down into that, I want to be able to tie weight stats to queries.
Query store.
2017 Query Store.
And so that's where I think that is the one thing that I actually like. So I'm going to make a plug here for the Database Health Monitor, which Steve puts together. And that is the and the SolarWinds is very similar. So if you're using the SolarWinds tool, that ability to then take, so I see the weight stats, I can see, CX packet weight. Okay, now I see CX packet weight within that hour window. Let me look at the queries that are running. I feel like just getting the weights for an hour period are not super helpful.
So Carlos, the thing is that's a third-party product,
right.
And it's a good one. It's a good example of why you would want a third-party product, because the stuff built into SQL Server before 2016 may not, well, it definitely doesn't have it.
Right.
And then you would have to build something, or you can install Database Health Monitor, which is free. It's a good reason for promoting that.
Right.
Even the SolarWinds one, but
I've never been able to get a company to pay for a monitoring tool. So
there you go.
Just and
I
worked for a company that made billions of dollars. And
there you go. Hey, David Stokes.
But that's why I capture SP who is active every minute as well before we upgraded 2016, because then anything big that was running, we had it.
Gotcha.
So
it's a good point, because we're running our own.
Yeah.
All the time. Or Steve's one does it for you, and it's great.
Okay.
So
I think we have time for one more.
One more.
Then we need to wrap
one
up.
more. Okay. Well, let's find an important one. We'll jump down to 56. There's no query 56? No, that's a lie. See, I told you. Okay. So once you get down to query 56 and below, you start getting database specific queries. And these will tell you the ones that run the most frequently are the ones that have the most reads, writes, and CPU. So those will help you from the cache tell you which ones are the bad queries or the ones that are eating up the most resources in your system. So if you're suffering from parameter sniffing, these are the queries you're going to want to run so you can see which ones are eating up the most resources inside that database.
And then compare that back to the
index thing. And then you go back to the indexing and stuff, or you just recompile the procedure because you know it's the one that's causing you parameter sniffing. These are the queries that I use to set up an auto recompile. When we had high CPU, we pulled out the top two and we auto recompiled them, and we quit getting paged all the time. And we did some auto stats updates as well with it. So, but once you get down to query 56, I think through 62, those are some queries you take and you look at if you think you're having the parameter sniffing problem, and see what pops up at the top. And those are the ones that you'll want to look at for that particular scenario. So, but like Glenn pretty much covers everything when it comes to diagnostics, DMV queries, and you can find pretty much everything you need in there for or your system that's not being captured.
This one's also since the server was started.
Yes.
And that's the struggle I'm with, right? I'm trying to figure out, because like you see a big number since it started, well, that could have happened 30 days ago. Versus if you have it hourly, then you start seeing trends, and then I think have a better informative use of that number. So. And
the procedure could have been recompiled for a different reason, and it had been since it last recompiled. So it's not necessarily since a restart. If an index gets added or the stats get updated, the procedure gets recompiled. So it's not necessarily since a restart if it's a stored procedure. So, no, not really. Not a nice way to know. So, but we found in our shop whatever was popping up to the top, if we took the top 2 and recompiled it, we usually got our CPU to go back down below 90. So, and we were happy. But then when we upgraded 2016 is so much faster, we didn't have the problem anymore, and we actually decommissioned that process. We didn't need it no longer, even though we still have parameter sniffing.
Okay.
It's not, yeah, he did most of it.
Thank you, Tracy.
He wrote all the bad stuff.